everyone, it's Fionn. Welcome back to my channel, Croesnol Eva Chanel. Today I'm doing the end of year book tag. I saw this video very recently from Maisie May, but I believe she's using like the standardised list of tags that everybody uses when they do this tag. That's the one I'm going with, what she left in her description. But I'm pretty sure she took it from Destiny Sidwell, who I think started this tag. I don't have a book to match every single prompt perfectly, so I'm kind of going with what I've got, but I've done my best to match them up. I also have some which could be used for two, and I've only tried to use them for one each, so hopefully there's not too much crossover. But let's just get into it. The first one is kind of a negative one, but it starts on the most disappointing read of the year, and for me, this isn't necessarily the most disappointing, but it's definitely up there, and that's Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This just wasn't it for me, and I was really excited to find a book that would kind of ease me into fantasy that everybody seems to be loving, and maybe I can start getting into fantasy too. And yeah, this book just wasn't it. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, no, I really didn't like that. But at the time I did decide that I would read the next one and the one after if they became available to me. I still might, but yeah, I've seen a lot of opinions since then where people have kind of shared my views but have expanded on them a bit more, and I've been like, oh yeah, you're right, that is true about this. It was kind of a rip-off of the Hunger Games. The romance for me was just terrible, honestly. I didn't really feel like they had a connection. I found them annoying and immature. So yeah, most disappointing book of the year, Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Then we have an underdog book, which I've taken to be a book that I didn't think I was going to love and then absolutely loved. A book that I didn't even really think I was going to like, but I wanted to give it a go, and that is Checkmate by Ali Hazelwood. I've read one Ali Hazelwood book before this, and it was The Love Hypothesis a couple of years back, and I really didn't like that book. And I haven't touched an Ali Hazelwood since, but people were saying like this is the best one, and I enjoy chess. You didn't have to enjoy chess to enjoy the book, but it would probably help if you did. So I felt like this was a good one to go back into. Man, I loved this book. I was giggling, kicking my feet, swooning. I really enjoyed this book, and I would still be choosy about which Ali Hazelwood books I'd go for in future, but I'm definitely not writing them off. I'm writing her off as an author whose books I'd like to pick up. Checkmate by Ali Hazelwood, The Underdog. Next we have an overhyped book. I had a couple of these, but to be honest, I don't read loads of books that are really well hyped up. Obviously Powerless could have worked for this prompt too, but the one I've chosen is The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. This is such a popular book and people think it's absolutely amazing, and I thought it was okay. It's not that I didn't enjoy this book, but it just wasn't what everyone else was making me believe it was going to be. Then we have a book I loved in the moment but don't think about now. And the reason I've chosen this book is because I have thought about it quite a few times since I read it, but when I keep thinking, well, what are my favourite books of the year, I keep forgetting to mention this one, and it is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Sorry about that. I absolutely ate this book up. I loved it, and I read the whole original trilogy back to back, which I don't think I've ever done with a series before. I loved this so much. I read it back in March and it was a 4.75. It was one of my top reads of the year, but I do keep kind of forgetting about it. Like, it was amazing in the moment and for a while afterwards, and now I'm like, oh yeah, I did read that. But I don't know if that would be the other way around with one of my other favourite books from this year, if I'd read them at the opposite times. So like I said, I read this one early in the year. My book that I would say is my favourite book of the year, I read in August, I think. So it is a lot fresher in my mind. So maybe that would change things, but I don't know. I just realised I'm crouching so much slouching, that I may have cut my chin off, but sorry about that if I did. I'll try and sit up with better posture. Favourite book couple of the year, Fizzy and, what is even his name? Connor. The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. This was my first Christina Lauren. Wasn't sure that I was going to love it, and I loved it. I loved this book so much. I think I gave this 4.75 stars. I didn't have any 5-star reads this year, which is sad, but I think I'm going to talk about that in another video. Like, it's fine. It's sad, but it's not sad. This would have been one of the contenders. This would have been one of the contenders. And then probably Checkmate would have been one of the contenders. And the next book I'm going to talk about is the main contender. But anyway, I loved this book. And I felt like with this book, I believed their chemistry. I could feel it. It was like sizzling between them. Whereas other characters, like I was saying in Powerless, I didn't have that. I didn't really believe the connection. And I read these back to back. I read Powerless and then this one, and it was such a relief when I read this one. They were so self-aware, they were mature, they were emotionally available for one another and for themselves, which makes a huge difference, and that is a big positive for me in a book. And yeah, favourite book couple of the year, it's got to be Connor and Fizzy, even though I did forget Connor's name. And then my favourite character of the year, Miss Eleanor Oliphant of Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. This book ripped me apart. I felt joy, I felt sadness, I felt loneliness, I felt humour. Man, this book is so good. It is so good. I loved it and I cried, and it was just, yeah, I loved Eleanor Oliphant and I related to her and I felt for her. And I didn't relate to her every aspect of her. Like, I was confused by her at some times, but I really felt like I was getting to know her. And yeah, oh, I love this book. The next one is a new favourite author I discovered this year, and I wouldn't really say I've got any new like author-by authors. To be honest, I'm not much of an author-by author person, but an author I tried for the first time this year who I really loved was Abby Jimenez, who wrote Part of Your World. I really, really loved this book, and I definitely want to read some more of hers, the next ones in this series in particular. Other honourable mentions would go to Lynn Painter. I read my first Lynn Painter, really, really enjoyed that. And obviously Christina Lauren, that was my first book of theirs. I'm going to be choosy about which ones I pick, like I said, because I don't love a lot of romance tropes, and a lot of the very popular ones are not my thing, like fake dating, enemies to lovers, those kinds of things. But I have picked up, what's it called? Love and Other Words, I think, by Christina Lauren. I believe is a friend to lovers, so I'm going to try that one next by them, which I'm really looking forward to, and hopefully I'll find some new loved books in there. Then we're going opposite for an author who didn't work out for me this year, and unfortunately that was Alice Oseman with Solitaire. Alice Oseman I previously would have said is my favourite author. I still might, but this is the only book I read by her this year and it did not do it for me. Having said that, this is her first book. She wrote it when she was 17, so I think it's understandable that this isn't, in my opinion, and I don't think I'm alone in that opinion, that this is not her best work, but that's absolutely fine. We all have to start somewhere. I think it also goes to show that you shouldn't judge an author on their debut, because the improvements in her writing since then are obviously tenfold. I love her books. Loveless is one of my very few ever 5-star reads. I've also read Heartstoppers volumes 1 through 4. I haven't read 5 yet, but I loved all of those. And I Was Born for This and Radio Silence. I think that's it. They've all been 4 stars at least for me, her books, apart from this one, which I think was a 3. So still not awful, but the plot just felt very loose to me. It felt very random, and I didn't really know why the things that were happening. Yeah, this book just wasn't it for me, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to try Alice Oseman again. I definitely am. The happiest read of the year, I can't really, like, nothing sprang to mind. Nothing sprang to mind when I read this one, so I'm going to go with The Do-Over by Lynn Painter, because it's like a cute, fluffy, fun romance, but I do think there are sad things in this. But hey, I felt very happy when I read this book, I know that much. And then we have the saddest book of the year, which I think is my only repeat, but Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. This is definitely the saddest book I read this year. It's not the only book that made me cry, it's the only one that made me feel the way this made me feel. Next we have the most frustrating book of the year, For When I'm Gone by Rebecca Lay. This was frustrating for several reasons. Firstly, the characters were all horrible, and I was reading it like, what? Why are you talking to each other like that? It bothered me the way they were talking to each other. It's written in like a manual, so there's different fonts when she's in the manual and then when they're in like the main text, but a lot of the text is really blurry, so that was frustrating for my eyes, like visually frustrating. And also because I'd been like really looking forward to reading this. It was quite highly anticipated for me. I got in a box of stories, so I've never heard anyone else talk about it, but I was always really intrigued by the blurb and thought this was going to be a really moving read. Yeah, DNF'd it. Thought it was terrible, and I'm waiting to get rid of it. And then the next one is the best adaptation of the year, and I don't have one for this, but what I do have is the worst adaptation of the year, which is a book that I absolutely adored, and then they had to go and butcher it with that absolute shambles of a series. I will say I binged the whole thing in one go, but that's not because I was enjoying it, it's just because I couldn't be bothered to move off the sofa, and because we were watching it together, me and Ben, we were kind of like united in the fact that we were watching something so awful. But God, I don't like to talk so bluntly about things, but that was awful. Then we have best book cover of the year. It's got to be Anatomy by Dana Schwartz. I think this cover is absolutely stunning. It's so clever, being a heart and a woman in a dress. I think it's amazing. Now, Hazel, what's her surname? Sinnott, was a contender for my favourite characters of the year, but I was saving this book for this prompt. This is up there as one of my favourite books of the year too. I really enjoyed this book. But yeah, this cover is stunning. And that's the only good thing about For When I'm Gone. The flop on that book is unreal. Love that. But yeah, this is my favourite book cover of the year for definite. And then we have a book that I haven't stopped thinking about, which, again, I don't really feel I have one that perfectly matches this prompt. However, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, there's a scene in this, and this wasn't like, this was a very average read for me, but there's a scene in this, I think quite near the start, where Sadie has designed a game for her college class and her classmates have to play it, and they all play it and they think it's like a pretty decent game, I think, and then they get to the end and find out the concept behind the game and what they were unknowingly like doing and what that says about them, and they were all so mad. I can't do it justice, and I'm not gonna try because also spoiler, but that scene and that game that she created I think about all the time because I think that is so clever. But that's kind of the only one that I can put forward for this. I just realised I don't know if you can actually see any of the books because I'm holding them all down here, but I feel silly holding them all the way up here, so now I don't know what to do. The next one I have is a book I can't stop recommending, which I actually have lent to someone at the moment. It's called Chasing the Scream by Johann Hari, and it's about the war on drugs. It's a non-fiction book and it is phenomenal and so fascinating, and I honestly think such an important book about such an important topic that gets overlooked and judged so fast. So if you're interested in reading anything about that, or you just want to pick up a good non-fiction book, please pick up Chasing the Scream by Johann Hari. I think it's exceptional. That was another, I think, 4.75 star read for me this year. I read it very, very early in the year. That book is fantastic. And then an unpopular book I loved, which I don't really have anything to offer here. What I do have is a book that's not hugely well known that I liked, which is The Hike by Lucy Clark. I gave this 4 stars. It's one that probably could have gone with that I liked in the moment and then kind of hadn't thought about. I do think of it every now and then, but this is just a book that I haven't seen many people talking about. I gave it 4 stars. I know I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. A book that I thought I'd love but didn't, Francie's War by Francie Rebenek Epstein. This was quite disappointing for me, which is controversial because it's a memoir, so it's someone's lived experiences, but I just didn't think it was particularly well written. And I usually absolutely love a war memoir, but this one just didn't hit the mark for me. The book with the most unique concept that I read this year, Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bastarrica, translated by Sarah Moses from Spanish to English. This book is about, it's a dystopia, I never know if it's, oh, it says it right there, dystopia or dystopian, but it says dystopia there, about basically all of the animals have got this virus so they can't be eaten anymore, or at least that's what the government have led everyone to believe. There's conspiracies about whether that's actually true. So they start breeding humans to use as food, and they call it special meat because they don't want to call it humans. Very interesting. It didn't hit the way I wanted it to, but it's a fantastic concept. A book from this year that I'd reread, I mean, the ones that I've mentioned as absolute favourites, So Eleanor Oliphant, The True Love Experiment maybe. I'm not a huge rereader. I don't know if I've ever actually reread a book, but the only ones I can think of are maybe Harry Potter, because I feel like that's one of those things that when people start to love, they like to go back and reread them. And also, if it's going to be a while before I get the next ones in the series, I might end up wanting to reread some of them to get back into it, but I don't know. I probably wouldn't reread it anytime soon, but it's possible for the future. And then maybe On Palestine by Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappé. This, if you've heard me talking about this before, you'll be like, put that book down, because all I do is kind of moan about it. But I didn't get it. It was not too smart for me, but it was too... There was too much assumed knowledge in this for me to like it. A lot of it went over my head. So I think that if I did more research and found some books or sources of information about Palestine that were a bit more accessible to me, after that I might come back and reread this. And then finally, a book I wish I got to this year, Black Book by Matteo Ascari-Poor. I have had for a few years on my physical TBR, and it's one of those books that I always think I'm going to want to pick up, and then when it gets time to pick up a new book, it's never this one, and I don't know why. It just never ends up appealing as much as I thought it would. So I would like to read this and get it off my physical TBR and just find out if I actually like it or not. So those are all the books, and then the final things are to talk about my 2024 reading goals and reflect on those, and then my 2025 goals. So I am not a person who sets a numerical reading goal. I think I did it in 2021 because I got into reading midway through 2020, so I worked out like kind of the rate I'd been reading and what that could translate to if I was doing it for a full year, and then added a couple more. So I set a goal of 30, and I think I near enough doubled that. And since then, reading has been so much a part of my life that I don't feel a need to set a goal, because I know I'm going to read. And I'll do it as much as I want to. If I'm not doing it for any reason, then it probably is a pretty good reason, and I would pick up on it if I realised I wasn't reading as much as I'd like, and then start to dedicate more time for it. So all that to say, I didn't have a numerical goal. The only kind of goal I had with reading this year was that I wanted to make a granny square for every book I read. So I saw in November of last year, I believe, Brando's books on Instagram. It just came up as a reel like that on my algorithm. She was crocheting granny squares to represent books that she was loving, and then I think the goal was to put them all into a blanket. As soon as I saw that, I was like, I'm doing that for next year. That's going to be my 2024 reading journal. I just need to learn how to crochet. So I had literally no idea how to do it, but I decided that that's what I wanted to do. So that is what I've been doing. Now, I have done it. It has been a little bit stressful at times. I've been posting a reel on my Instagram page of me making every single one. I've got a bit behind with that. The only thing now is that I have like 17 left, I think, and there's 16 days left, and that's without me finishing any more books this year, which I think I will finish probably at least 3 more books. So I just feel bad that I'm going to be annoying on Instagram, posting at least one every single day now. And then I have the hardest part after that of putting them all together into a blanket, but I think I'll manage. In terms of numbers, I do think I've read pretty much the same. So far I've read 60, so I think I'll get up to at least 63, which I think I might have read 63 last year, and then maybe 58 or something the year before. Like, it's very standard for me. And then a reading goal for next year. There was one actually, other one that I wanted to do. I would have liked to have had a few more languages on my, like, languages of books read, and I've read 1 Welsh book this year, so that's not really good enough, but it wasn't like a set goal. It was just something that I thought of at the start of the year and then forgot about. I do have some more Welsh books, so I am planning to read some of those in probably next year. Main thing is, like, I want to keep up with this YouTube channel. I'm feeling really happy with how it's going. I have thought about, do I want to set a target for uploading, but I don't think I do, because I want to keep this as a hobby. I want it to be fun. I think I've managed to post a wrap up every single month this year, and I think I would like to keep doing that, and then maybe aim for 1 extra video per month, which I think I could manage. But I obviously don't want it to become a chore. I want it to be something that I enjoy doing. That's the reason I'm doing it, so I really need to bear that in mind. And then the last one just says, what will you prioritise in your 2025 reading year? But I think that's the same. I would love to find a 5-star read next year. I've been really positive about it so far this year, the fact that I've not found one, but there are little parts of me and little times where I'm like, that is a shame. Like, is it a me thing? Because am I being too harsh, or am I not picking up books that I should? Hey, it is what it is. Hopefully I'll find some books that are 5-star reads for me next year, but I did have some really great reads this year and I'm still happy with how it went. So that's everything there is to say. Thank you for coming to watch my end of year book tag. Thank you for watching Bookmas. This should be the last Bookmas video I upload, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and I will see you in 2025.